Las Vegas, 1973. The city was alive. Neon lights burned across the desert. Casino floors thundered with laughter. Thousands of fans flooded the streets surrounding the Las Vegas Hilton. But nobody knew they were about to witness a moment that would become one of the most whispered stories in Elvis Presley history. Not because of a song, not because of a scandal, not because of a performance, but because of a single face in the crowd. A face Elvis Presley never expected to see again. And when he did, everything changed. Before we continue, tell me this. What would happen if the one person who knew your deepest secrets suddenly appeared in front of you while the entire world was watching? Keep that question in your mind, because that's exactly what happened to Elvis Presley. The king of rock and roll, the man who seemed untouchable, the man who could command 20,000 people with a single word, the man who looked fearless. But appearances can be deceiving. Backstage 30 minutes before showtime, something felt wrong. Crew members rushed through the corridors. Musicians tuned their instruments. Security guards checked every entrance. Everything looked normal, except Elvis. Joe Esposito had worked with Elvis long enough to recognize the signs. Something was bothering him. The king sat alone in his dressing room. No jokes, no laughter, no stories. Just silence. His white jumpsuit hung perfectly from his shoulders. The diamonds sparkled beneath the dressing room lights. Yet Elvis stared into the mirror as if he were looking at a stranger. Joe finally broke the silence. "You all right, E?" No answer. A few seconds passed. Then Elvis slowly looked up. His eyes seemed distant, almost troubled. "I got a strange feeling tonight." Joe frowned. "What kind of feeling?" Elvis hesitated. Then he whispered something nobody understood at the time. "Like something from my past is waiting for me out there." The room fell quiet. Joe forced a smile. "You're just nervous." Elvis nodded, but he didn't look convinced. And deep down, neither was Joe. Outside, the crowd was already chanting, "Elvis! Elvis! Elvis!" The sound shook the building. 20,000 fans. 20,000 hearts. 20,000 people waiting for the king. Yet only one person mattered tonight, and Elvis didn't even know she was there. At that very moment, a black car pulled into the Hilton parking lot. The woman inside sat motionless. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. She had considered turning around, more than once. Maybe she shouldn't have come. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe some memories were better left buried. But then she looked toward the glowing hotel entrance and stepped out. The desert wind caught her hair. She adjusted her black dress, put on her sunglasses, and began walking toward the arena. No reporters recognized her. No fans noticed her. No one knew who she was. At least, not yet. Because within the next hour, the entire building would be staring at her. And one man on stage would completely lose control after seeing her face. The stage manager's voice echoed through the backstage hallway. 5 minutes! The orchestra took their positions. The crowd became louder. The lights dimmed. A wave of excitement swept across the arena. This was it. Showtime. Joe glanced toward Elvis. The king stood up, took a deep breath, adjusted his belt, then looked toward the stage entrance. For a brief second, Something strange crossed his face. Fear. Real fear. Then it disappeared. The performer returned. The legend returned. The king returned. Or so everyone thought. Because in less than 1 hour, Elvis Presley would stop singing in front of 20,000 people, forget the words to his own song, and stare into the audience as though he had just seen a ghost. And when people later talked about that night, they wouldn't remember the lights. They wouldn't remember the music. They wouldn't even remember the show. They would remember one moment. The moment Elvis Presley saw her. And froze. The crowd had no idea. To them, it was just another legendary Elvis Presley concert. Another sold-out night. Another unforgettable performance. Another chance to watch the king rule the stage. But something had already changed. The moment Elvis stepped beneath those lights, the strange feeling he'd carried all evening refused to disappear. It grew stronger, with every song, with every cheer, with every passing minute. As if fate itself was moving closer, waiting, watching, preparing. And then it happened. The orchestra launched into another hit. The crowd exploded with excitement. Thousands of voices filled the arena. Elvis smiled, waved, threw another scarf into the audience. The king looked completely in control, but his eyes kept searching. Left, right, front rows, back rows, again and again and again, almost like he was looking for someone, or maybe afraid he would find them. Backstage, Joe Esposito noticed it too. Something wasn't right. Elvis never searched the crowd like this. Not during a performance. Not during a packed arena. Not ever. Yet tonight he couldn't stop. Almost as if some invisible force kept pulling his attention toward the audience. Then came the song, Suspicious Minds. The opening guitar riff echoed through the Hilton. The crowd erupted instantly. People jumped to their feet. They knew every word, every note, every lyric. This was one of Elvis's greatest songs, one of the safest moments in the show, a song he could perform with his eyes closed. And for the first minute, everything seemed perfect. Then Elvis turned toward the front rows and saw her. Suddenly, nothing else existed. Not the crowd, not the lights, not the music, not even the song. Only her. Priscilla. Sitting just a few rows from the stage, silent, motionless, tears running down her face. For one terrifying second, Elvis forgot how to breathe. The words vanished from his mind. The arena disappeared. Time stopped. Because the woman staring back at him wasn't just his ex-wife. She was every memory he had spent years trying to outrun. The first time they met. The promises. The wedding. The laughter. The arguments. The distance. The heartbreak. The divorce. Everything crashed into him at once, like a tidal wave. And suddenly the strongest performer in the world felt completely helpless. Priscilla looked up. Their eyes met. Neither moved. Neither blinked. 20,000 people surrounded them, yet somehow they were completely alone. A conversation without words. A reunion without a greeting. A goodbye that had never truly ended. Backstage, Joe felt his stomach tighten. He followed Elvis's gaze, and the moment he saw Priscilla, his heart sank. Oh no. Because now he understood. And so did Elvis. The past wasn't buried. The past was sitting in the front row, watching. The next lyric arrived. Elvis opened his mouth. Nothing. For the first time that night, no sound came out. The crowd didn't notice immediately. The band continued playing. The drummer kept time. The guitars kept moving. But Elvis stood completely still, frozen. A statue beneath the spotlight. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The longest seconds of his career. The musicians began looking at each other, confused, waiting. What was happening? Elvis Presley never missed cues. Never. Yet now the king himself looked lost. The audience slowly sensed it. The energy inside the arena shifted. Something felt wrong. Nobody knew what, but everyone felt it. Priscilla felt it too. She could see the pain in his eyes, the exhaustion, the loneliness, the sadness he had spent years hiding behind fame. And suddenly she understood something. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was real. Too real. She wanted to leave, stand up, walk away, end whatever was happening. But her legs refused to move. She remained in her seat, and the moment stretched even longer. The band started losing confidence. The drummer hesitated. The guitarist glanced toward the stage manager. The orchestra waited for a signal, any signal. But Elvis gave none. Because at that moment, he wasn't standing in Las Vegas. He was standing inside a memory. And memories are dangerous places, especially when you've spent years trying to escape them. Then something happened that nobody expected. A tear appeared in Elvis's eye. One tear. The spotlight caught it, and suddenly the crowd went quiet. Not completely, but quieter. People started noticing. Whispers spread through the arena. Something was wrong with Elvis. Very wrong. The king looked heartbroken. The king looked vulnerable. The king looked human. And somehow that was more shocking than anything else. Then came the moment nobody would ever forget. Elvis gripped the microphone tighter. His hands were shaking. His breathing had become heavy. The band was barely holding the song together. 20,000 people were watching, waiting, wondering. And then, the king of rock and roll completely forgot the next line. Silence. Pure silence. The arena froze. The band stopped. The audience stopped. Even the cameras seemed to stop. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Elvis Presley, the man who had conquered the world, standing motionless, unable to sing, unable to move, unable to look away from one woman. And what he whispered next would leave 20,000 people speechless. The kind of silence that shouldn't exist inside a sold-out arena. 20,000 people sat frozen. The band stood motionless. The cameras kept rolling. Nobody understood what they were witnessing. Only seconds earlier they had been watching Elvis Presley perform. Now they were watching a man fight a battle nobody else could see. The microphone trembled in his hand. His breathing echoed softly through the speakers. Every eye in the building was fixed on him, waiting, wondering. What happens next? Would he continue? Would he leave the stage? Would the show end? Nobody knew. Not even Elvis. For several endless seconds, he simply stood there staring at Priscilla. The woman who once knew every dream he had, every fear, every weakness, every scar. The woman who had loved him before the world called him king. The woman who remembered the boy before the legend. And suddenly Elvis realized something. For years he had been running from mistakes, running from regrets, running from memories, running from pain. But no matter how far he ran, the past had finally caught up with him. Right here, right now, under the brightest spotlight in the world. Priscilla's eyes filled with tears. Elvis swallowed hard, then slowly lifted the microphone. The arena leaned forward, 20,000 hearts waiting for a single word. And then he whispered it. Priscilla. Barely louder than a breath, yet somehow everyone heard it. The entire arena froze. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some fans looked at each other in disbelief. Others simply stared, unable to process what had just happened. This wasn't part of the show. This wasn't on the SEP list. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was truth. Raw, unfiltered, painfully human. For the first time that night, Elvis looked away. His eyes closed, his head lowered. And when he spoke again, his voice sounded different. Not like a superstar, not like an icon, not like a king. Just a man carrying years of regret. You ever love someone so much? He paused. The silence grew heavier. That even after they're gone, a part of you still belongs to them? Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even dared to breathe too loudly. Because everyone knew they were witnessing something rare, something real. The kind of moment money can't buy. The kind of moment fame can't create. The kind of moment that only happens when a heart finally stops hiding. Elvis slowly turned toward the piano. The musicians waited, confused, uncertain. Then he nodded. One small nod. The pianist understood immediately. His fingers touched the keys. A soft melody floated into the darkness. The first notes of Always on My Mind. The crowd gasped. Nobody expected this. The song wasn't scheduled, the band wasn't prepared. But none of that mattered, because Elvis wasn't performing anymore. He was confessing. The first lyric left his lips, soft, fragile, almost broken. Maybe I didn't treat you. His voice cracked. The audience felt it instantly. This wasn't acting. This wasn't showmanship. This was a man opening wounds he'd spent years trying to hide. Priscilla covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Elvis continued, each lyric sounding less like music and more like an apology. A lifetime of words finally finding their way out. The arena remained silent. People cried openly. Even hardened security guards wiped their eyes, because every person in that building had loved someone. Every person had lost someone. Every person understood regret. And for a few minutes, Elvis Presley wasn't singing for 20,000 people. He was singing for one. Only one. When he reached the final chorus, his voice nearly failed him. The emotion was too much. The memories were too heavy. Yet somehow he kept going. One line, then another, until the final words arrived. You were always on my mind. The last note faded, and silence returned. Not ordinary silence, Sacred silence. The kind of silence that only follows something unforgettable. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. Nobody moved. For several seconds, the entire arena simply sat there, feeling, remembering, processing. Then something happened. Priscilla slowly stood up. Her eyes locked onto Elvis, and through her tears, she mouthed two simple words. "Thank you." Elvis smiled. A real smile. Not the smile of a performer, not the smile of a celebrity. The smile of a man who had finally put down a burden he'd carried for years. Then he nodded, just once, as if an entire conversation had happened without either of them speaking, as if years of pain had somehow been understood in a single moment. And maybe it had. The crowd finally rose to its feet. One person, then 10, then hundreds, then thousands. An entire arena standing together. Not screaming, not losing control. Just applauding. Slowly, respectfully, almost reverently. The applause rolled through the Hilton like thunder, but Elvis barely seemed to hear it, because for the first time that night, he felt peace. Real peace. He stepped toward the microphone one final time, looked across the sea of faces, then quietly said, "Sometimes the truth takes longer to sing than the song itself." The crowd erupted, but Elvis was already turning away, walking toward the darkness behind the stage. The spotlight followed him for a moment, then disappeared. And just like that, the king was gone. Yet nobody left their seats, because everyone knew they had witnessed something bigger than a concert, bigger than music, bigger than fame. They had witnessed a legend become human, and somehow become even greater because of it. Years later, many fans would forget the set list, forget the lights, forget the exact songs, but they would never forget that moment. The moment Elvis Presley stopped performing and started telling the truth. Because legends are remembered for what they achieve, but they become immortal for what they reveal. And on that night in Las Vegas, the loudest thing Elvis Presley ever said was spoken in a whisper.